just get out the organization. Of course, we all went over there to see it. You know, everybody went over there to see it. And I like the concept. Which one? Oh, you like it? I really like it. I like it. Yeah, oh, I think that, yeah, the Alto project. Yeah, it's beautiful.
You sent your presentation to Rob, right? Or
I sent it to whoever, to you and whoever told me to.
let's try. What do you remember the title of it? So I can pull
Palo Alto HRV Stanford Research Park, maybe? Something obvious? Otherwise, I have it on my laptop. Are you staying?
What time did you send it?
It would have been maybe 6 last night.
6 p.m.
Oh, I haven't even. Okay.
Can you go there first?
Otherwise, I have it on my laptop too.
I literally got it.
She has her laptop. She could.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Show her the walk.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the June 22nd meeting of the Historic Resources Board. Shall the Secretary please call roll?
Chair Bernstein.
Here.
Vice Chair Bauer. Here. Board Member Corey. Board Member Bunnenberg. Here. Board Member Kohler. Here. Board Member McKinnon.
Here.
Board Member Wimmer.
Here.
Council Member Liaison Holman.
Yes.
And I would also like to announce, because there's been questions asked of me, we cannot open the door behind leading into the conference room because there's currently another meeting going on there until 11 o'clock.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda is oral communications. I have one card from David Carnahan. Welcome, David.
Good morning, Chair Bernstein and board members. I'm here today to talk about board and commission recruitment. We are currently looking for 7 people to serve on the newly formed Stormwater Management Oversight Committee. This is a very important committee that's going to oversee the city's expenditures of the stormwater management fee that was passed by property owners back in April. So the details for this committee, the Stormwater Management Oversight Committee, we're going to have 7 openings. The first 3 terms are only for 2 years, and then we're going to have 4 terms that last for 4 years to create that staggering that we have typically on boards and commissions. Applications are due August 1st at 4:30 p.m. I'll give you flyers. Applications are available on the city clerk's website, www.cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. This board meets, or this committee is going to meet less frequently than most of the boards and commissions, probably 2 or 3 times in the first year, and then once or twice each year thereafter, assuming, of course, there are no issues that warrant further investigation. So any questions, again, please contact the city clerk's office, 329-2571. Thank you, and I'll leave copies for all of you.
Okay, thank you, David. Good. Okay, see no others. Next would be any agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
None today.
Okay, thank you. Next is city official reports, Historic Resources Board meeting schedule and assignments. I believe there are none.
Just to give a quick update, the next meeting we will have is July 13th. We will be having a joint meeting with the ARB, following a regular meeting with just the HRB. So and then we only have 2 items, one for the HRB, one joint meeting with the ARB, and then you'll be done.
Okay, so this is July 13th, yes. ARB, HRB joint meeting?
We've already polled to make sure we have a quorum.
What time is that?
8:30, the usual time for the HRB meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you able to announce what agenda item that would be?
The first item is the general use permit for Stanford, and that will be the environmental review document for that project. Okay. And then we will conclude the HRB alone and pick up the ARB and do the 400 Channing project, which you'd already seen once.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next, then, on our agenda is a study session, and that is presentation and discussion of the Stanford Research Park Framework for Historic Resource Evaluation, prepared by Heritage Services staff of Stanford University's Division of Land, Building, and Real Estate. Shall have staff have an introduction for us?
Yes, thank you. This is Amy French, and I do have here from Stanford Laura Jones, who is their archivist. She can tell you her precise title, and a historic planner, and we have Tiffany Griego as well from the Stanford Planning and Development Office. She can correct me there. The presentation is regarding a framework document that was prepared at the city's request. We have many Stanford Research projects that come through here, and being that the park is now over 50 years old, we found the need to have some kind of overall context statement for the park. So without further ado, I'll let our guests speak, and they have a presentation.
Great. Hi, and welcome.
I'm sorry, the slides don't seem to be projecting at the moment. The important images that you need to look at, the maps, are actually in your packet. I just have more great historical photos that I didn't use in the framework that are in the slideshow. We may get it up, we'll see. So I'm Laura Jones. I'm the Director of Heritage Services and University Archaeologist at Stanford. I oversee historic preservation efforts on the university's 8,000 acres, our campus in Redwood City, and the Hopkins Marine Station in Pacific Grove. A couple of years ago, we sort of became aware that the research park was hitting the 50-year threshold. Opened in 1954. And in the course of doing some due diligence work for Tiffany Griego, the manager of the park, I started to review all the historic resource evaluations that our tenants were submitting to the city. And I noticed that there were some, what I call myths and misconceptions about the park that were getting repeated in those evaluations. So there were some historical inaccuracies in the evaluations. And these are well-qualified consultants who are picking them up from newspaper articles and publications. It's not that they invented these historical inaccuracies, but they repeat them and they form conclusions based on them. So in conversations with Amy French and Hillary, I said, maybe we need to set the record straight about how the park was developed and what it represented. And so they asked me if I would write this document, which I did, with some help from Julie Kane, who's a very talented and rigorous historian who works for me. I'm an archaeologist. We can get a little fuzzy. There's a lot of uncertainty in archaeology, and I really wanted to nail these facts down. So Julie helped me a lot with doing that. So what I was going to talk about this morning, the purpose of the document. It's really meant to streamline your HRE process by providing that historical overview of the development of the park, so that applicants don't have to make that up again every time they do it. And it does that by providing you this overview of the development of the park. It addresses the myths and misconceptions, and then it provides some recommendations about how the criteria for listing on the California Register should be applied, based on my experience. Julie Kane and I had done the evaluation of the Ampex property in Redwood City, the Stanford Medical Center complex. We've done a lot of work in mid-century projects, and so we use that experience to guide the development of that framework. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is that the Stanford Industrial Park, which is what it was called at the time, is just one piece of a very elaborate post-war development boom that happens in Palo Alto. As you know, we have Edgewood Plaza, Alma Plaza, the San Antonio Charleston corridor, the Stanford Shopping Center, the Eichler neighborhoods. Post-war development in Palo Alto is not all concentrated in the Stanford Industrial Park. And so far, you don't have an overall historic survey and context for that period of time in the city. But the industrial park is part of that broader picture of what happens after World War II. If you go to, I talk about how the role of the university in the development of the park in the document, the competing interests between Alf Brandon, who just wanted to rent real estate and bring in income to support the operations of the university, and Fred Terman, who wanted to form intellectual partnerships between companies and the engineering school. Mm-hmm. So we talk about that tension a little bit in the document, and it's interesting, but what we're really talking about today is the bigger picture. If you go to page 22 in your packet, there's a rainbow-colored map, Stanford Research Park Sequence of Development. It took quite a bit of work to make the map. What we discovered, because nobody had done a general overview of this, is that the park was developed in these chunks, right? So the first chunk is the bright dark orange up here, where the first building opened in the park, Varian Associates. And then this brighter orange, let me think, Kodak, the old Kodak plant on Page Mill. So they start along El Camino, and they slowly start creeping south up the hill, right? And it happens in this sort of piecemeal way. So they would do a subdivision, annex. Each of these was a separate subdivision and annexation. So they'd record the subdivision, annex it to the city. Inside Stanford, they had to have leased some of that, pre-leased some of that to afford to do any of it, right? So they're constantly trying to develop the money to add more to the park. And so it develops in this way. And what's important about that, and I'm sorry because I had some slides about it to show you, is that there are research parks, mid-century research parks, that were master planned, right, in other parts of the country. Research Park Triangle, for example, IBM Almaden Valley, Bell Labs, right? So I've got some pictures of a couple of those. I don't know, how do you get next slide? Roll it? Okay, yeah, I don't use trackballs. We can come back to some of those later, but on the bottom, I'm sorry, they're so small, you'll see that there are master planned research parks. The Stanford Research Park was not a master planned research park. So sometimes in these HREs, in the introductions, people will read marketing material that Alf Brandon put out there about what a terrific plan he had for this park, and it was setting the standard in suburban industrial parks for the whole country. Mm-hmm. And when you read the literature about the development of business parks, Stanford's is noted, in fact, for having had no plan, right? So when you get to criterion C and you're talking about the quality of landscape design and architectural design, it's my opinion that the park as a whole is not an entity, right, that has a unified plan. So that's what I'm talking about here, because we were getting some HRE consultants who were saying it's associated with the Stanford Industrial Park, so it's significant. And I think we need to be more careful and more rigorous than that. That's really what this was about. You'll also see up there the oft repeated error that the Stanford Industrial Park was the first university-affiliated business park. I think it's actually the 4th or 5th in the country. So Alf Brandon liked to say it. It was good marketing. It's just not true, right? So, and it was also being used to drive a finding that the entire research park was significant because it was the first one in the country. It's just not true. So what the framework is suggesting is that we should be focusing on the individual businesses and buildings that they're in. And it provides some guidance on what are the questions that I would ask. You'll notice there's some more maps about the current conditions. Over half of the park has been redeveloped since its original development. And there's a map in there that tells you the age of the structures, in case you're curious about one of them. Then we get to the framework. My recommendations about this. So under Criterion 1 events, what we look for are specific discoveries and inventions. What companies were in the buildings? What products were they working on? There is actually an enormous amount of scholarly literature now about the history of Silicon Valley, a lot of it. And so you go searching through that to see if products or people associated with this business have been identified as being really important in shaping the technological revolution that happened in Silicon Valley. So, but you're looking for a specific product. You could be looking at the laser printer or whatever it is. You're looking for specific products and specific inventions. We also have the issue of criterion consideration G in the National Register, exceptional significance, because innovation just keeps churning along in these enterprises. And if they made a significant discovery, whatever some scholarship shows is significant, whether it's the computer mouse, whatever it is, right? If it happened less than 45 years ago, there's a higher bar for whether or not you should consider it significant, because it has to meet the test of sufficient time passing to gain a scholarly perspective. So we apply that when we look at individual mid-century buildings. Similarly with Criterion 2 persons, what I would do, and I think most consultants eventually get around to doing, you look at, for buildings that are built in that first generation in the park, you want to know who those company founders were. What motivated them? Who were they? What relationship, if any, did they have with Stanford? Who were their principal research staff? We researched them as well. The kinds of data we have, I put it in the report in case people needed to know. We have files on the early development of these properties because they went through a Stanford design review process before they came to the city, and I can coordinate that with consultants. The city obviously has files about that too. Obituaries and achievement awards, we look at those. Engineering in particular is a field that likes to give awards, and so you go through these engineering societies, and did this engineer win an award? What was the award for? And you drill down on that. You're always looking for some evidence other than your own opinion about whether or not something is significant. And once again, there's an exceptional significance threshold for living persons. So if you're still alive, the National Register in particular views that you could still stumble and fall and do something horrible, shades of, say, Bill Cosby or something, right? Where your legacy could be eclipsed by something stupid you did in your 80s. And so it's really asking that you try to wait, until the sum of a person's life is complete before you judge them historical. There are exceptions to that. So that's another thing to think about when we're looking at this relatively recent period in time. Then for architecture, the way I view the park properties, they are mid-20th century commercial architecture. It's not a surprise. Most of the architects are commercial architects. I personally would look at who the architect was. I'd compare the building to other buildings. I'd check and see whether or not they were elected a fellow of the AIA. Are they a master architect? Did they win any awards? Is the building published anywhere? All of that stuff all of that evidence that tries to move it from a subjective opinion about whether I like the building. Since I'm not an architect, I try not to do that, form some formal opinion about whether the building is good design. I look for evidence of a consensus about it. And I think it's also really important to do the rigorous exercise of comparing it to similar properties. So let's say that it didn't win an award, but you can find examples of projects that commercial projects that won awards in that time frame. Does this compare favorably to those? So that's actually how I approach architectural evaluation. With mid-century modern, it's a little bit harder than the more traditional architectural styles where you can get a list of character-defining features and just check them off and go, oh yeah, this is great Spanish colonial, look at the wrought iron lamp. It's not quite like that with mid-century. It's a more formal and a less decorative style. And many of you who are architects can apply a different approach to that, but for me, I'm always looking for scholarly evidence to support that conclusion. Then, of course, you have to apply the 7 aspects of integrity. You are familiar with all of those, I'm sure. And once again, we have data at Stanford Real Estate in the property records. The city has records that help trace the changes to a building over time. There was a really bad round of visible exterior seismic bracing that happened. Other things have happened to these buildings. And it's really important to be able to make a statement about whether or not something has integrity in the HRE. So that's my overview. Let me go back real fast and see if there's a picture you really want to see. I don't think so. It's fine. So do you have any questions?
Yes. I'll start with my first question, Laura. Often on the trucks I see around campus, it'll say Division of Land, Building, and Real Estate. Let's see, so I understand lands and buildings is part of real estate. What's the separate title of real estate? It says lands, buildings, and real estate. I asked some of the drivers, and they didn't have an answer for me.
Land, buildings, and real estate,
Yeah.
LBRE is what we call ourselves. There have been, over the 126 years of the university, different management structures for land. And for a number of years, our commercial real estate divisions were separate from the university land management.
Okay.
And about 2007, they were recombined under one vice president, Bob Reedy. And so it's all centralized now. And so we instead of we were land and buildings, now we're land, buildings, and real estate.
I was confused because I thought land and building was real estate, but they're just separate departments.
They're separate departments.
Yeah,
we have facilities operations, the people who maintain our buildings.
Right, yeah.
We have the capital projects, the people who build our buildings. We have the university. We now have 2 planning offices. We used to have 1.
Okay.
So university architect and campus planning, led by Dave Lennox, and land use and environmental planning under Catherine Poulter. Whitney McNair is the director of land use planning, and I'm the director of heritage services. So it can be a little bit confusing.
Okay.
And we have 5 or 6 divisions of the university that actually manage land.
Okay, great.
So it's a big place.
Okay, thanks. And the other question I had was on the Varian building, built it was given a lease in 1951. I saw it says 1951. I thought I saw it. He says 1952.
52 on the map.
Yeah.
Oh, I was talking about when the lease was offered in 1951.
They actually start talking to Varian in 1949, but Varian is in San Carlos.
Yeah.
And they don't actually occupy that building, I think, until 53 or 54.
Yeah. So my question is, when the lease started in 1951, and it's a 99-year lease, that brings the year 2050, so 33 more years. Do you happen to know any of the terms of that lease? Can the building be demolished, even though the lease would still continue? Is there any restriction of the lease of demolishing buildings? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head whether that would be included in the lease.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Those are my questions. All right. Roger.
I probably should have disclosed, but I used to work up there at building number on Porter Drive, 1963 or 64. We moved from Bellevue, New Jersey in 1954, drove across country to this crazy town, Palo Alto, with my parents. And my dad was a photographer, printer, and he worked for a company called, oh gosh, my mind just went away. And they started out in a little hut behind the Stanford Museum, and one of those little Quonset huts behind it, which are gone now. And so then they worked there the building's gone. It was demolished last year or 2 years ago. So that's in that little area, that corner, that building's already gone. So they did wind tunnel studies and things like that. When Candlestick Park was built, we went out and we put little flags up all over the stadium, and we were there all day and would take a record. We'd record where these flags were going. And of course, if you ever went to Candlestick Park before it was enclosed, one day it would be going this way, and it would go around like this, and then it would also go down like that. So the ball players had no idea what was going on. We also did studies out, and anyway, I have some history there, so it's kind of fun. But I went the other day. Happened, I don't know, 2-3 months ago. I noticed that the building was gone. It had been torn down. Now, so that building has, I guess, had his time, and so it's gone. Is that I was trying to understand what you're trying to keep a record of all the buildings and everything that were there. Is that correct? Is that?
We started, Julie and I, on this assignment of just trying to understand how the research park was built. And it being relatively recent history, no one had actually ever done this. How were the parcels added, and put it all on one map and try to understand it. The building projects and their permits, those HRE reports are typical. I have written a couple of them, but most of them, buildings Stanford doesn't own, I don't evaluate. So they come in to the staff with a finding about whether or not they meet the criteria or not. I have to say I am really very interested in documenting the buildings that are gone as well, because I think it's really important. I think documentation and recordation is really important. And so I know that our university archivist, Daniel Hartwig, and I have been talking about that. I've talked a little bit to Steve Steiger about it, that we need to make sure that we collect company records from companies in the research park and archives, that we really are recording that history, whether the building is physically still there or not. And as you'll see, more than 50% of them aren't. But I find myself fascinated, by what Preformed Line Products was doing in Palo Alto, right? And its connection to Stanford's High Volt Lab. And I just gave a speech about this last week. So I think it's important to record that history. And to get memories and stories and documents and photos from people who live in the community before they go away.
We used to have a lot of that document from my dad's collections and things. If you give us your contact, there may be a few items around that might help that I can pass on to you.
Thank you.
Other board members, board member Vice Chair Bauer.
So thanks for putting all this together. I'm in looking at your maps, which are incredibly helpful. Everything north of Foothill Expressway is more than 50 years old, and you've nicely documented what isn't there and what is of the original stuff. Basically, probably Varian HP buildings are the only original ones of any significance, historic significance, because of what was developed there. I'm sure there are others. So as I looked at this, I thought this is a textbook case of an historic district. Even though some of the buildings have been removed, the history of this space in terms of the industrial power of the United States in the computer industry is right here. This is the beginning of it, and this is where it eventually exploded to the rest of the world. And yet, what I'm hearing from your presentation is that you're looking at this as not a district at all, but individual spaces. And so that has a really different impact, I think, in terms of the way Palo Alto might look at redevelopment.
I think that's true. So, I looked at it, and I didn't do a formal district analysis.
Sure.
It's 13 pages long. It would be a much bigger job than that, and frankly, I'm always leery of imposing myself on properties that the university doesn't control. Right? That Stanford's going to tell you what's going on here. Obviously, I was thinking that question, about is there a significant concentration of resources, which is that are linked by a theme, which is what forms a district. And overall, when I look at the whole research park, I don't think the whole research park is a district, both because of the piecemeal development and because of the amount of redevelopment. Districts come in all scales and sizes. 2 buildings can be a district, right? So I have not researched the HP properties, right, or variant. I haven't done it. So I don't know the answer to the question, is there a variant district? I just don't know that, right, because it takes a lot of work. But I was trying to address the creeping belief that because there's an entity that we all call the Stanford Research Park, and because people believe it's really important in the history of Silicon Valley, that there must be a district. I think it takes a lot more work than that to demonstrate that something's a district. And in my view, it's too patchy for that. Now, that's not the only professional point of view somebody could have. And it would have taken a lot more work to actually analyze it as a district. But I was concerned that people were leaping to the conclusion it must be a district without going through that rigor. And typically, and we don't have a single listed historic resource there yet, right? So it may just be too soon, because you need to have some historic resources to anchor a district. Right. And so it's kind of a chicken and egg problem that way. And that may evolve over time.
Yeah, I think the HP building would probably be your anchor. It would easily be a landmark building from its architectural standpoint, and of course the people who built it and the work that was done there and the different way in which the Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard conceived of how employees should interact. I'm just remembering a book, Bill and Dave, which was funded by the Hewlett Foundation to give a history, to provide a written history of their partnership. And they talk a lot about that building, and I think it won awards. At any rate, I guess my concern here is, and by the way, I appreciate all of the very thorough work you've done. I grew up here. I remember building those buildings. I remember when we used to go up Page Mill Road, and there was nothing there from El Camino. It was just fields and cows. Two-lane road. Not what it looks like now, obviously. So I guess my only concern is, and the reason I raised this issue about historic district is Professorville in Palo Alto has similar characteristics, a wide range of development over 50, 60 years, and we've created that as a district, an historic district, even though the buildings are different ages, different styles, architectural styles, and have different characteristics that make them significant. And I think that since this is a document that planning is going to use to make decisions about replacing these buildings, and that pressure of replacement, I think, is going to increase because of the seismic structural requirements and needs. Those buildings were built at a time when we didn't have engineering for earthquakes. So that's why most of them have already come down, and also they've expanded. My point again is I just don't want to lose the sight of the fact that I think this is a significant development in Palo Alto and ought to be considered as a district every time a single building within this area is evaluated. And since we have never evaluated, that I'm aware of, any of the development in this industrial park, I'm just bringing this up as a topic of discussion.
Tagging off of Vice Chair Bauer's comment about districts, Laura, you mentioned so there's no building at Stanford Research Park. There's no buildings are listed on any historical register?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's a good point about a district not having any, there's nothing listed there. My question is, for example, going back to the Varian building, on El Camino near Hanson. If a building owner wanted to demolish that, is there any review process from City of Palo Alto, do you know, for that?
Yep.
Since it's a non-listed structure?
And we can explain.
Yeah. So any time that we have a major application, architectural review application, we would require a preparation of a historic resource evaluation if the building is 50 years or older. And so that we would receive payment from the applicant and go out and commission a consultant to do the work. So that part of that review could happen even though a building is not listed on any historic register then. Okay.
So that then could support some of Vice Chair Bauer's comment about a district, non-listing may not be the reason not to have a district if we want to pursue a conversation like that. Okay, any other questions, Vice Chair?
I don't want to bore you again, but this brings back memories what people do when they're younger. I was in the historic post-55, and we specialized in rock climbing. And also, during the summer, we specialized in climbing towers that are all the lifts. I lost my mind. The cranes, out there were all these cranes. We used to climb them and put flags up on top. My mom never knew that.
Board Member Bunenberg.
Yes, and I have wondered many times about particularly the Varian brothers, because they too made some landmark kinds of inventions, and it's totally lost on most people these days. They've heard of the bigger company Varian, but not the very beginnings of it that showed a lot of initiative and ingenuity and new ways of doing things.
I'm a fan of the Varians too. Part of what the framework, though, asks you to do is when you look at one of the Varian's landmark inventions, the klystron, right, which is what runs the linear accelerator at SLAC, they developed the klystron in the basement of one of the buildings in the main quad. They then go on to perfect it at Sperry Gyroscope in New Jersey during World War II. They come back and start building it at an industrial scale in San Carlos. Then they wind up in Palo Alto. What do they do with it when they're in Palo Alto is the question, right? So they can be historic under Criterion 2 as the inventors of the klystron, by the way, no matter where they did it. But if you want the event of invention to be why the building is important, you need to really figure out what did they do in Palo Alto, right? That's what the framework is suggesting, is that we really need to drill down to understanding what happened in Palo Alto in these buildings, and it's possible to do that. There's an enormous amount of oral history out there. The Computer History Museum in Mountain View has a very active oral history program. So does Stanford Historical Society. So you can discover that, right? But that's what makes really great local history is when you can say, it happened here, right? And you can trace that out. And that's what I was recommending that HRE consultants do, is spend a little time actually investigating these companies and their products and what they were doing while they were in the park.
I just had a quick clarification question. The potential historic sort of value that you're speaking of, and that's also reflected on your map, is anything older than 45 years. I just wanted to again clarify where the 45 years old comes from.
Typically, and Amy can correct me if I'm wrong, typically the threshold for significance is 50, but in a planning context, best practice is to evaluate things at 45 because they are in some planning window about to be 50. So, and 50 is not actually what's called a bright line for the National Register or the California Register. It suggests that you really need to apply a higher standard to younger events and buildings, but 45 is best practice, and what the National Register and California Register say is 50, but it's 50 with a blurred edge.
And also, this is all Stanford-owned land. Is that correct? Or this is,
We own the land
And
and
so-
ground lease it, so I believe the tenants own the improvements.
I see.
They own the buildings.
So when it comes time to remodel or demolish, that's up to the tenant then?
Yes.
Isn't there some Santa Clara County planning review also of?
No.
Oh, no. Okay. Thank you for that information.
All of the land on the map was annexed to the city of Palo Alto.
Ah, okay.
So as most of you know, and we'll talk about it some more, I'm coming back to talk to you about the general use permit and its historic survey. The academic lands of the university and most of our residential lands are governed by the Santa Clara County use permit
right.
and the Board of Supervisors. And our commercial lands were annexed to the city of Palo Alto. So the shopping center, for example, and the research park are in the city.
Okay, that explains your comment. You said Stanford has no control over these properties, but because the land is owned by the city of Palo Alto.
No. No. So the city of Palo Alto exercises planning approval, zoning, planning, all of that. The university owns the land and collects rent.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
And the tenants make improvements. Occasionally, Stanford buys back a property and redevelops it ourselves.
Right.
But we're treated the same as any other tenant when it comes to review at the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other, McKenna, do you have your, yeah.
Well, no, just the question that came up about 45 years, I think that's National Park Service guidance. You know, we used it in federal projects I've been involved too.
Yes, I agree. It is. I think it's a pretty standard best practice is to evaluate things at 45, and it does occur as a federal recommendation.
On our recommendation for action today, it says receive the presentation. Laura, thank you so much for that. And also then for the HRB to provide comment on this document. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Staff, yes, Vice Chair Bauer.
Question for staff. So after this hearing, what does staff do with our comments?
Well, receive them, record them in the minutes. Beyond that, I guess as we look at properties that turn over in the research park, and we, as mentioned, commission a consultant HRE for any building that's proposed to be demolished, altered, what have you. We would certainly take your comments into consideration. If there was any errors that you, I'm going to just say typos because that's silly. If there was something that's factually, you want to provide feedback, we have our author here to receive that input.
Well, I'm asking that question because the purpose of this hearing is to develop, as I understand it, develop approach to evaluating buildings that are going to be remodeled or demolished or replaced. And if this document, which is presented to us, is one being used, then from my perspective, it doesn't address the historic district strongly enough. In fact, the document argues against an historic district. And I understand that argument. I'm not complaining about it, but I think that from a city perspective and from a planning perspective, that needs to be considered. The historic district idea needs to be considered in the evaluation, and that's not here.
So, it would only be by council direction, in my awareness, that we would embark upon a work program that would include going further than
No, I'm
the
not
university
suggesting
has
we
already
go
done.
further. I'm suggesting that evaluations of these properties include an overall look at the idea of an historic district, so that they're not looked at as an individual space or an individual building. It's the thread that you pull the thread on the sweater, and pretty soon you don't have a sweater, you have a pile of yarn, and that's how you undo a district. And I understand it's not a district. I'm not asking that it be made a district. I want the idea of a historic district evaluated, and that's within the context of this presentation. That's all.
So, when we assign a consultant to prepare an HRE, what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would like that consultant to consider whether, in addition to this particular site being potentially historic, and if it's historic, eligible, what are the possibilities that it is part of a district?
Exactly. I think every time a project in this area is considered, it ought to have a question answered: does this represent a district? That's all.
Councilmember Holman, you had your. Beth, please.
Yes, I also think that this relates to our sort of struggle and need for a context statement on mid-century modern architecture in general, because it's not just a problem with the research part, it's a problem with residences, business buildings that we review all the time, and I'm not sure that we have a full context statement on that.
I'll just say we do not have a context statement for mid-century modern in Palo Alto.
Hi, welcome, Hillary, and welcome Emily Vance, too. Good.
Good morning,
good morning,
Chair and board members. If I could just say a few words, Hillary Gittleman, the Planning Director. First, I wanted to really thank Dr. Jones and her staff for helping us by preparing this framework document. What we were up against when we came up with this idea is that every historic consultant who walked in the door wanted to write the history of the world, from the beginning of time in evaluating an individual project within the research park. So one of our intentions was to kind of frame the evaluations that we ask for and use in evaluating individual projects within the park. So the board members are correct. One of the recommendations of the study is, or one of the findings of the framework is that the appropriate focus is on buildings and their history and significance rather than the research park as a whole. I think your point is well taken that there may be historic clusters or districts within the research park, but I think at a high level we agree with the suggestion that we should be focusing not on the park as a whole. If we did, just to a hypothetical, if we didn't agree with that and we wanted to evaluate the whole park, I think every report would turn into, as I said, an evaluation from the beginning of time, and it would just get excessive in terms of the amount of effort and work involved, and we just didn't think that was warranted. But I think the suggestion that a context statement is needed for this period, and that the historic district question potentially about a subset of the park is one that should be asked in the context of these evaluations. Very much appreciate that input.
Okay, good. Right. As far as the idea of a context statement for mid-century, how or who could start to create a statement like that? Would that be a subcommittee at HRB? Would that be city staff, outside consultants? Yeah.
Well, let me, you introduced her. Let me introduce Emily Vance, our historic planner, as if she needs an introduction. I think most of you have met her by now. But I just wanted to say that, we had prepared a draft grant application for a CLG grant, and we didn't, move on it. We were busy with Professorville, and then we were working on the ICLR guidelines. But that could be something that we go and seek some funds so that we can have a consultant to work with our professional staff. At some point in the future, we have a potential program here, and that could be one of the tasks or efforts in our program in the years to come.
Good. Okay, so perhaps then staff could look at that possibility of sooner rather than later. So good. Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I'm very pleased that this has come forward. I think it's a great initiative. I don't know what prompted it.
Well, again, it was because every consultant we were working with was struggling for some kind of framing to help them complete the reports that we need to conduct our reviews. And so we thought we could give them a leg up by providing this kind of direction.
Okay, good. So there's nothing major going that's in the offing or anything?
No.
It's just like
This
the
was
individual?
just in the
Yeah.
context of individual reports, we realized everyone was struggling with this question.
Well, I very much appreciate this. I don't presume this is going to come to council.
No.
So along with especially Board Member Bauer's comments, Hillary, you know this, I have issues with study sessions because the comments that the board members have made, it's like Amy has indicated how those comments are going to be captured, but they're not going to be in this document. There's not an action item to amend the document, in concert with, thank you, Laura, with Stanford's prepared document here. And I don't see that there are any, I don't know, I presume that staff worked closely with Stanford in preparing this, but I don't see any staff comments about this or how it was amended based on that. And I have a couple of questions just for my own purposes in terms of education, I guess. So on packet page 18 it says proposed guidelines. So there aren't adopted guidelines, these are proposed guidelines. So it seems like there ought to be another iteration. Maybe this should come back to the HRB one more time with opportunity to comment. It's a question. And then on packet page 20, it seems like under criterion 3, a question I have is, it says, buildings more than 45 years old should be evaluated as examples of mid-20th century commercial. What will be the criteria? So 1971, for instance, is 46 years ago. God help us all. But that's not mid-century modern. So how will those be evaluated? That's unclear to me based on this document. And then also it seemed like the criteria seemed very, very high. So to be a significant property for building, the design should represent a fine example of its style and period or represent an important contribution by a recognized master architect. That seems like a really high threshold. If I think about how our Palo Alto inventory was put together, they were, good examples of a style and retained integrity and, other criteria. But just speaking to the architectural side, this seems like an exceedingly high threshold. Just from my information. And then something that was mentioned in the presentation was that if there are buildings by the same architect, if I understood it correctly, buildings by the same architect, would this project or this building compare favorably with the award winners? Again, that seems like a really high threshold. As opposed to being, good examples of the period or good examples of a style or something. It seems like a really, really high threshold. So I guess I'm a little, and the maps, my God, they're fantastic. These are excellent, excellent. But I guess those questions leave some lack of clarity for me about how it's going to be used, and an opportunity for the HRB to weigh in, for instance, on the district aspect. Because when I look at the maps, it looks like, and comparing maps, it looks like there is some possibility for districts. The budget discussion is coming to the council on Tuesday, and I had raised at Finance Committee if Planning and Transportation needed any additional budget to undertake something. I don't know how much money it would take to. Now, there's a grant opportunity to look at mid-century modern, but is there, some way that we could support this endeavor with some amount of budget funds considered in Tuesday's council discussion? Those are a lot of things I put out there at once just to kind of get them all out there.
Well, through the chair, maybe Councilmember Holman and I can talk offline about the budget question, which it doesn't seem is directly related to this topic. But on the subject of this framework document, it was prepared by Stanford staff, qualified professionals at our request. I mean, we asked them to undertake this. We did see a draft and asked them to make some additions and changes. And its function, as I indicated, its purpose was to provide some guidance and some kind of framing information to the historians and architects who are preparing historic resource evaluations for our use. So it's not immutable. I mean, there's no reason why it can't be changed. There's no reason why one of those independent professionals couldn't come to us and say, thank you. I reviewed the framework, but in evaluating this building as you've requested, I see these additional issues. I mean, we want the people who work for us as professionals to exercise their independent judgment and use this as a tool. It's intended to be a tool and not a box that you can't get out of. So we appreciate all of your comments. I think probably we're going to have professionals who raise some of the same questions, and we will modify this framework in the future if we feel we need to provide the support that helps our professional consultants focus and deliver the kind of reports that you and we both rely on when we review projects.
Thank you, Ms. Gittleman. I have a question. On current process, let's just say a building owner of, let's take the example of the Varian building again, wants to demolish that building. So then City of Palo Alto would require a historic resource evaluation for that proposed demolition. It would come to the HRB or no?
So to the extent that if the determination, the HRE determines that it's a historic resource and then it's proposed to be demolished, then we have an EIR basically, and that would be an opportunity for the HRB to weigh in on the cultural resource section of that EIR. If it's determined not to be a resource, then there's no obligation to bring it to the HRB. It's a straight ARB to the extent that what's the building that replaces the building is compatible with the if there were historic buildings and there aren't currently designated historic buildings surrounding, we might ask the HRB to provide some input and feedback on the replacement building's compatibility.
Right,
but in this case, there are no listed historic resources.
Okay, so if it's not, so if it would come to the, say the historic resource evaluation says it should be a listed property, but it's not listed. If it still comes to the HRB then could recommend to the ARB no demolition. That's the process for that? If the HRB says, look, it's significant, we think, that it should not be demolished, then that's the advice we would give to ARB, correct?
Well, it's technically advice you would give to the director or council in the case of an EIR if we're finding overriding statement of why this should be demolished because what's coming is necessary for Palo Alto or what have you, the statement that needs to be made in a council setting.
Okay. Vice Chair Bauer.
So I'm wondering how often it is that the city asks the owner of a piece of property to create a criterion for evaluation of, say, a group of properties that the city will then use. It seems to me that's inviting the fox into the chicken coop, and that's an extreme example, but these are all Stanford, related buildings. Stanford doesn't own the buildings, but they own the land. So Stanford's come to Palo Alto, created this series of criteria, as Councilman Holman points out, create a really high bar in some cases. And in fact, I think, taken as a whole, this really will take almost every building in the research park out of historic criteria. I'm just thinking that this may be not I understand why you wanted to have Stanford do this, but Stanford's not a disinterested person in this. And so I'm a little troubled by that, and I'm not making any comments about the integrity of the Stanford Historic Office. They're superior people and have very, very excellent records. So it's not a comment about that. It's that if this is the document that the planning department is going to use, I think it should have been done by somebody who has no skin in the game when it comes to the properties.
Oh, thank you for those comments. I completely understand that perspective. In this case, there are a couple things I would just add. One is, we view Stanford as an important partner in the research park because they play this role as the underlying landowner in many cases. So we are evaluating and they are evaluating the proposals that come in from prospective tenants or existing tenants. The other thing is that they have the most information, the most historical data and information about what has happened in the research park that can be brought to bear on evaluation. So we thought it was important to invite their input. And as I tried to communicate earlier, we don't view this framework as a straitjacket. We're still working with professionals who are preparing our historic resource evaluations, and they're going to use their professional judgment in conducting their reviews. If they see something, in this framework that they disagree with or that they feel is taking them in the wrong direction, they have the discretion to, consult with us, use their independent judgment and tell us, hey, we disagree or, we think this other thing is true. And so this should be viewed as a tool, not a straitjacket.
Well, of course, Stanford's always been willing to provide information and generously willing for all projects that have been reviewed by me on this board in the last 10 years, and that's invaluable information. I just think there should be sort of an arm's length transaction here, and maybe this could be the beginning of creating the criteria for evaluating these projects, but it's not the tool. I think it needs to. I think this needs more work, based on what Councilman Holman pointed out, at least two things. So maybe we should agendize this and bring it back, and we should explore it more. And then make it into a formal city tool for evaluation. So this is a place where the historic evaluation can start. Now maybe that's the way you're already seeing it, but I'd like to get the board sort of stamp on it, not just comments that get lost in minutes that will never be seen by any of the people who do the evaluations.
Yeah, I guess we were viewing this as a more informal tool that we use at the staff level that would always be subject to the additional review and expertise by the consultants involved in preparing the studies, which often you do see. If we turn this into something more formal with board comments and the like, then I think we are talking about something more different than we had in mind, that we would probably have to involve the city council in that review, and it turns into a whole separate work program and work effort. So we can certainly talk about that, but that was not really what we had intended initially. We were trying to put something together that would help us and help our consultants, and wanted to share it with you as a matter of information, just because you see the reports. But we weren't viewing this as a big new initiative that we were going to spend a lot of time and energy redrafting and expanding.
Board Member Bunenberg.
Well, just as we learned with the process at times, and the fact that sometimes evaluations of projects, someone would come in and say, we would like to have a project, and it happened that it came in maybe through the development department, not necessarily in through the planning, and it's a real disservice to people not to warn them pretty early in the process that this could be an historic structure, and it's really sad if people have made huge plans, and yet we're often told there's not a project, so we can't deal with that. So my recommendation would be to put it into the process early.
Vice Chair Bauer, you made a comment about something coming back to the board. You want to expand on that, or no?
I don't think so.
All right, anything else? Okay, Dr. Jones, thank you so much for your presentation. And again, Sheriff Councilmember Holman's comment, these maps are just fantastic. Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. All right, next on our agenda is an action item, and I'll read it. Public hearing, quasi-judicial, 1451 Middlefield Road, consideration of an application for architectural review to allow the replacement of the Junior Museum and Zoo building with a new 15,033 square foot, one-story museum and education building, outdoor zoo and netted enclosure, and reconfiguration of and improvements to the existing parking lots, including fire access, accessible parking stalls, multimodal circulation, storm drainage infrastructure, and site lighting. An initial study is being prepared in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, Zone District Public Facilities. Shall staff have an introductory report for us?
Thank you, yes. Amy French here. I was here with you in January 26th to be precise, with a preliminary study session on this project. Prior to that, it had been to the ARB the week before, and to the ARB after some significant modifications to the concept in March of 2017. I have a brief presentation. Some of the images you saw last time, I think, we have a historic resource evaluation now that looked at the Lucy Stern Center and some of the historic courtyards, et cetera. One of the things I like about this image is it shows the circular drive here that was original, and kind of looks like a lawn area out here. And then over here it shows, in Burge Clark's original center, there is no parking lot. That parking lot came later in 1941 with the Junior Museum and Zoo. This is just the overview of the campus or complex with the Lucy Stern, the parking lot that's there today, and the Junior Museum and Zoo. And of course, over here, the Girl Scout House, otherwise known as the Lou Henry Hoover House. So the characteristics of the site, one-story buildings, and we have issues in the parking lot, including circulation and parking and storm drainage. This is what we see from Middlefield. So the last one with the HRB, there were comments on, gee, can you consider a gable? And so you'll see the architect has prepared a presentation showing the proposal. Again, these are just some images of the existing site. This is, I look over here at this Boy Scout facility and think, that's a perfect spot for the bird bath. There's a bird bath that's on the city property that is related to a Boy Scout leader. It's in front of the Girl Scout house. So here we have our children's library that was also Clark designed. And then this, again, image from last time shows the Girl Scout house, which has been analyzed in the most recent historic resource evaluation called the Rinconada. You have both historic evaluations in your packet. The most recent one, the Rinconada, does talk about the Girl Scout house, its significance, and the modifications to the area. What's interesting is the Girl Scout house, actually, the Girl Scouts of Northern California own the building, kind of like the Stanford situation, and the city owns the land, and the city leases the land to the Girl Scouts. These are some other images that I had last time. This is the scene shop at the back here. There's some very significant oak trees on the site that are to be retained. Again, it just kind of summarizes the Architectural Review Board's comments from January. And the architect and applicant team took these to heart, came back in March. The ARB supported the approaches, and they came back with a formal application. The applicant is going to summarize the HRB's comments in their presentation. So here we have our historic resources evaluation. I made reference to these, the one that is just recent, that talks about the parking lot, the Girl Scout house, and some of the features of the Lucy Stern Community Center. And it should be noted that the Rinconada long-range plan is not yet a project application. That's got a longer time frame on it. So, but the analysis, the Rinconada HRE, does look at other parts of the park. So we're not going to focus on those other parts today because that's not an application before us. And let's see, we will be back to the HRB, at least to the sense we're going to provide the draft environmental review document, the initial study, along with a modified historic resource evaluation. We're tweaking it a little bit because there were some references there that got a little confusing. So, and we are going to come back to the ARB in July to September timeframe. And then this is going to go on to council. There was a change to the code that suggests that the director forwards this type of a project to the council. So that's what's going to happen for final action on the CEQA document and the project. And I'm going to hand this over to Emily, who is our historic planner expert here on staff, and let her speak to the nomination process and eligibility of the Girl Scout House.
That as well. Okay, good morning, board members. I just want to start off by saying that ultimately this project does not cause any significant impact to historic resources, even if the project only partially meets some of the standards. We are in agreement with those findings, but would like some of the, oh, can you not hear me? Can you hear me? I'll just scooch over. Is this better? Okay. But we would like some of these following concerns to be addressed and the report to include the following. So these are some of the issues that staff brought up that we would like some clarification on. So in no specific order, there's the rewording of the passage that mentions further analysis. For clarity, we would like that passage removed, or to state very clearly that the analysis is presented in the following paragraph. We would like clear language used to state whether the front yard of the Girl Scout house is considered a character-defining feature of the historic landscape, and why it is appropriate for the front yard buffer to be reduced but not eliminated. So just, again, a little bit more clarifying language to call out that specific area, since that will be impacted. And ultimately, we would like to include National Register language in the final analysis, as there's a high likelihood the building will be listed in the future. So I think there is interest in getting it listed on a few local registers, including the California one, the national, and obviously the local. So we want that kind of National Register language to be included in the final report.
And then I have just on the screen here, what is the nomination process? Should the HRB wish to pursue nomination of the Girl Scout house? And, again, the Girl Scouts of Northern California own the property, the building, sorry, and they would need to be involved in, with a consent for us to move forward with that. Excuse me. And then, of course, the council approves local inventory listings.
And just to point out that for both the California and National Register, I'm sure you guys are all aware that consent of owner is not required necessarily, but it cannot be listed over the owner's objection. So I don't think that's going to be an issue in this case.
So, given that the Girl Scout house is looked at as eligible under criterion 1 and 2, therefore it's eligible for the city inventory. And so if the HRB would like to comment on that eligibility piece of this, that's not entirely what we're after today. We are after a look at the new formal application, but certainly we welcome your comments on that. So with that, I'm going to load the applicant's presentation. John, did you want to comment while I do that? Okay. Okay. And then so Sarah Vaccaro is it this one? Let's see. No. This one? No.
The
upper left?
That's it. Yes, the one you were just on.
Okay. That says 3:18 p.m.
Go to the one on the left is
okay.
The actual.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, I'd like to start with, since this is a quasi-judicial matter, board members, this is a quasi-judicial matter. I'd like to go down for each board member to disclose if there are any conflicts or been any other conversations with owners or applicants. Board Member Bunneberg.
I should say that I worked for the Junior Museum many, many, many years ago, maybe 40 years ago, and received a small salary for teaching some art classes to children. And then recently I visited the site and talked briefly with John Aiken, and we talked a bit about how zoo regulations had sort of changed over the years, and also some discussion about a tree.
Thank you. Board Member Kohler?
Oh, I don't know. Over the years, I've been there many, many times, so I just I drive by it a lot on the way down here. So, yeah.
Vice Chair Bauer?
I, too, have visited frequently, most recently with my grandson. I also sit on the Palo Alto Stanford Heritage Board, and Steve Elmsley is a member of that board, and he's affiliated with the Junior Museum. We haven't had any conversations about it, but just public record. I have that association.
Yeah, I visited the site and taken classes there. McKinnon?
I visited the site also.
I have visited the site as well.
Thank you. Historic Planner Vance, what was the first comment you made about suggested rewording? I didn't catch what you meant on your first rewording request.
Sure, I think it's somewhere on page 62 of the report. There's just it's just a little bit of I guess I'm not sure what packet page that is, but there's just a line that says further analysis. Page 110 of the packet. There's just a line that mentions further analysis is required. It was our understanding that the paragraph immediately following that is that further analysis, but we've had comments from other staff that would like that clarified. So these are just some of the comments that we wanted to bring up before.
Okay, I'm on packet page 110. Where's that?
The top paragraph.
The top paragraph.
Last sentence, very last thing.
It says, because the proposed JME project does not comply with all the further analysis is required.
The further analysis is that following paragraph.
Okay. I'm not clear what you're requesting us to look at.
So when you read this,
yes,
it makes it sound as if further analysis is required in the future.
Yes.
It's not. The further analysis is the paragraph immediately following.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, and so there was a little bit of confusion regarding that sentence with some of the other staff members.
I got it. Okay.
It's a very simple little change. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Good. Okay, thank you. All right, hi, and welcome. Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Now we can, yes.
Great. Thank you, board members, for having us today. My name is Sarah Vaccaro. I'm representing CAW Architects. We're the architect working with the Friends and the city staff on this project. We're excited to show you our updated design. We heard your comments in January as well as the ARBs and feel like we have a stronger project to present to you today. This is the existing site, as we're all familiar with, the historic Lucy Stern Category 1 Community Center. The Lou Henry Hoover House, which is up for historical significance. And then this is the existing Junior Museum and Zoo building and the adjacent outdoor zoo sitting in the Rinconada Park and the shared parking lot that sits between them. This is a brief summary of the comments we heard from you all back in January. Our main takeaways were that our project should better respond to the historical context of the Lucy Stern and the Girl Scout house. We were strongly encouraged to explore gabled roofs, as that's the predominant roof form in the surrounding area on the site, as well as the residential neighborhood. And so we've looked at that very closely and have a revised proposal for you today. Overall, it was discussed that the site organization is improved from the existing. However, there are some concerns about the parking lot edges as we get close to the Girl Scout building as well as the JMZ. So we've responded to that as well. And then the request for the HRE was fulfilled and outlined by Emily and Amy. So this is the site plan we presented to you back in January. Our building generally wrapped around the existing Don Redwood and the pecan trees. It's kind of a complex grid work of two different building forms with flat roofs. And as I said, a pretty large parking lot that gets rather close to the buildings. So we took a big step back after January's meetings and looked at the overall site organization and really tried to give the JMZ project a stronger civic presence on this site to reflect the importance of the programs of this facility. So we've reorganized the lower half of the parking lot and our building mass to align with the middle field grid, city grid. That allows us to create a strong access point into the main entrance of the JMZ through the parking lot, and then a secondary access that connects from Middlefield to our entrance and then into the park arrival plaza that leads into Rinconada Park beyond. With city staff, we've also incorporated a pedestrian bike only path that comes in from this intersection, loops through the parking lot, and then connects into the park. So really strengthening the pedestrian bike paths on the site, as well as clarifying and simplifying the parking lot circulation. This is our further developed site plan of our proposed project today. So as you can see, the building itself wraps around the Dawn redwood tree, creating a strong courtyard form that's reminiscent of the Lucy Stern Center. And then we've created a larger courtyard form as the entrance plaza here that incorporates the the pecan tree, and creates a much safer buffer between the JMZ entrance and the parking lot. We've also shifted this edge of the parking lot further away from the Girl Scout building to further preserve that front yard context of that historical building. All of the site circulation culminates on this park arrival plaza that then funnels visitors out into the park beyond. And the Loose in the Zoo, which is the netted zoo enclosure, is sitting in relatively the same spot as you saw last time in the park here. This blue box is a future phase building that I'll speak about in a little more detail. The first phase is more of an outdoor education zone, and then in the future, a building will be added at that point. So our design concept starts with the JMZ mission and vision, to engage a child's curiosity in science and nature. And so we've created this along the secondary access, a promenade that connects visitors from Middlefield to the JMZ entrance, to the park arrival plaza, and gives children a really interactive experience with science and nature exhibits all throughout that exterior plaza area. So there's opportunities for children to observe a wind facade that shows the movement and patterns of wind and understand physical sciences. There's opportunities for children to jump, hop, skip, crawl like animals as they look into the animals within the zoo. Opportunities for the kids to bridge over and climb down into a bioswale that will allow them to understand concepts of natural water systems. Opportunities to engage with STEM and math concepts and walk through a rainbow tunnel that illustrates concepts of light and color. And then also using kind of the edges of our project to illustrate concepts of space and scale. We see the architecture, the building mass, creating the framework, the stage for these experiences. And so our building takes a simple form and allows this exterior promenade to tunnel through it, to bridge over the courtyard, to engage with an entrance plaza, to create sheltered places for waiting and respite. We're proposing a taller gabled mass for the exhibit hall, and then a lower gabled mass that wraps around the courtyard and steps down along Middlefield to be respectful of the neighborhood context. So this is our proposed design for you. This is an aerial view from the parking lot. So you can see we have our entrance plaza here, and we've extruded the structural steel system of the building out into the entrance plaza and covered it with wood slats to create kind of an entrance porch to engage visitors as they approach the entrance. This is the main facade from the parking lot. So you see the entrance here. This is the Dawn Redwood Courtyard. This is the lower mass, and then Middlefield's here. This is the pecan tree and views into the zoo. This is the proposed future building, the future phase building, and then this is the Girl Scout building on the other side of the park arrival plaza. Materials, we are proposing, as we are proposing a gabled roof form, so more of a traditional form, we wanted to make sure that our materials reflect the contemporary time that this project will be built. And so we're proposing on the taller mass a standing metal seam roof that seamlessly turns over the edge and becomes the vertical siding on this building. proposing that in a neutral color. On the lower mass, along the residential side of the project, we're proposing vertical cedar siding as the exterior cladding, with a tight eave that has that still allows for a shadow line and references kind of the neighborhood, and then the standing metal seam roof on this mass as well. We're proposing accent features, details of skylight monitors that are wrapped in a red standing metal seam material, and then accents with that same red material around the entrance and into the rainbow tunnel. The idea here is that the red is used in very intentional places to draw the attention, create some interest on the facades, and also reference the clay tile roofs of the Lucy Stern Center in a respectful but compatible way. And then some of our fun materials. This is a children's center and zoo, after all. So we will have a wind facade that's actually we're collaborating with a public artist to design. So that will be a piece of public art front and center on the project. We have our rainbow tunnel. So while there won't be rainbow colors on the building, there will be rainbow light that shines throughout that tunnel. And that's the prism on the material board. Just a little bit of fun. Throughout the site features, we're proposing lithocrete concrete walls and seat walls. This is concrete that looks almost earth-like. So that'll be seat walls as well as portions of the zoo enclosure. And then this is the proposed zoo netting. We're also proposing to relocate the existing JMZ sign just a little bit further down Middlefield from where it currently stands, adjacent to the entrance into the rainbow tunnel. This is a clip from the HRE that just further emphasizes that the materials we're proposing today are compatible, but of our time with the historical context on this site. This is the eye-level view of the entrance to the project from the parking lot, as well as that same main entrance elevation here. This is the eye-level perspective from Middlefield, and as well as the straight-on elevation. For this elevation, we're proposing something a little simpler, a little quieter, as it is along the residential side of the project. And so we're proposing a big skylight monitor and windows where we need to bring natural light into the offices and classroom spaces, and then really focusing the excitement and the energy on the entrance into this promenade and the rainbow tunnel, and that's further accentuated by the JMZ sign. And just to note, there are many existing street trees, so this facade actually will be somewhat filtered by those street trees. Just a quick overview of the program of the project. We have the entrance plaza that leads into the main exhibit hall. The exhibit hall branches out into the exterior Loose in the Zoo experience, and then also into the Dawn Redwood Courtyard, which is themed with Jurassic science type experiences for the kids. The education classrooms as well as collections hub wrap around this side of the project, and then the back of house support spaces connect the service entrance on Middlefield to the zoo. This is the further developed floor plan off of that diagram. As I mentioned before, this is the proposed future two-story building on the ground floor. It's a classroom that will link directly into the zoo, and then on the second floor it's a butterfly and insect exhibit that will greatly enrich the visitor's experience to this project. This is a site floor plan of the zoo experience. So again, this outdoor zoo will be fully netted, but exposed to the exterior elements, and there'll be a lush tree landscape within it, as well as animals and small mammals free to move about with the children, and then there'll be larger or animals that need to be within enclosures as well. The central feature of the zoo is a faux tree, almost a deadwood tree that rises up to support the netting structure, and a portion of the future phase is to add a tree fort on the second level within that tree structure, so kids will be able to climb out into the middle of the zoo and experience the birds at more eye level. This is a section, a landscape section through the Dawn, so this is the Dawn Redwood tree. Our building wraps around it. This is the main promenade walkway, and so this is where the promenade bridges over the bioswale. Children will have the opportunity to step down into the bioswale, interact with the natural vegetation and water when it's there. And then this is the paid experience for the visitors, where they also will be able to climb down into the bioswale, but walk along raised walkways that surround the John Redwood tree and experience exhibits emphasizing the Jurassic character of the John Redwood species. And this is our closing rendering.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to start by another suggestion of a revision is on your message to engage a child's curiosity. I could see an adult's curiosity on the sides. I mean, this could be looks like it's going to be a really fun place to visit. So, okay. Right. Start with Board Member Bunneberg.
I have several questions about some of the things that are on the site right now. Is there any plan for keeping or using the stump garden that has the big part of George the tree? I don't know, staff may not know about George the tree, but on Cowper Street, a huge tree was dying through the center and looked like it was going to split. And the neighbors were so upset about seeing George go that they got together with the city, had meetings, and agreed that this stump would be saved and that various other pieces would be saved, and then that in a little bulb out in the street, George, the baby tree, was planted. And so you can see that if you go on Cowper Street, very near Homer, near the Women's Club, sort of across the street from the Women's Club, George is seemingly doing well. Also, I wondered about the very interesting structure that was actually constructed with straw and I think it was adobe soil that is kind of a seating area right in the same place. And the other thing is the little Josephine O'Hara tree that's planted out near the sidewalk. And it has a plaque. And what will happen with those things?
This is John Aiken, Senior Manager, Junior Museum and Zoo. We love George. we actually put him up on blocks so that he wouldn't rot, and we plan on salvaging George and having him part of the new stump garden. In fact, on drawing L1.4 references the new stump garden. The cob bench, though, is much more difficult to save. It's all built out of salvaged concrete and, as you say, adobe, but that will have to be torn down. Josephine O'Hara plaque, my understanding is that the tree is long gone, but the plaque still remains there, and we can salvage the plaque and perhaps dedicate another tree to Josephine O'Hara.
There is a little tree there.
I think that tree was planted more recently.
Okay. Board Member Kohler.
This is a fabulous design. It's incredible. I remember taking my kids to the zoo all the time, and we will be having a youngster arriving in our family next month, so we're looking forward to taking him there. I have a modest comment about the design of the buildings. All the zoo design, all that is fabulous. But your comment about our time is a little, somewhat disturbing in a sense to me. I've worked on over 500 homes in Palo Alto, and I'd say about a third of them are tile-roofed homes, and the rest are varying things. But of that percentage, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 are modern homes. All the rest are very traditional. And so to say our time, and maybe for this use it's okay, but it's right next door to the Children's Theater and all the tile roofed homes, and suddenly we have this our time building, which to me is, and as it goes on, you have a metal roof and this and that, it's going to look kind of clunky. I don't see it fitting in with the neighborhood and all those homes in the neighborhood, that it's going to be it'll look great for in the beginning, but as it wears out during the rain and those years, I think people are going to drive by and say, oh, there's that old museum. It's going to look, it just doesn't, to me, fit in with the Children's Theater neighborhood and the tile roof. I know tile roofs are probably more expensive, but everything else is fabulous, and I'm just concerned about you look at the picture here. These.
Which page, Roger?
Page 4.2 is one example. It's just this whole lot of metal roof, and the exteriors. I understand why we're doing it, but I just then you look next door to Children's Theater, and it's two different worlds. Now maybe that's appropriate. But it's right on Middlefield Road, so you're going to be driving down what's going to look like the old Quonset huts on Stanford, and I'm not so thrilled about that. I don't know exactly to say it's bad or not. I'm just finding it kind of jarring. You drive down right past there, and suddenly you're going to see this. I don't know. People are going to think we didn't spend any money on it because it's going to look like a garage. I think. That's I don't know.
Vice Chair Bauer.
So I'd like to say, follow Roger's comments and say that when I opened this, I was thrilled to see the new forms. I think you captured what we were most concerned about when we came before him. But when you came before us, I too share Roger's concern about the metal standing roof. And it's again, I think there's a notion right now that modern boxes are sort of our architectural theme. It's a current theme. Yet in the 40 years I worked as a residential contractor, I never once built one of those. And even though they're somewhat popular in this community, I don't see them in San Francisco very often. I don't think that's a ubiquitous design trend. And I guess the metal roof is, I understand the economy of that metal roof, but in a way it's too harsh for me. So you did a great job of creating a form that I think relates very well to Lucy Stern and to the Girl Scout Center. And in particular, I want to thank you for page A 5.0, where you have called out the finishes with it. And so I'd like to now transition to that because I was confused by some of the tags. There is the letter D, which is wood siding, that at the top of the page points to the roof. And if it was really going to be wood siding up on the roof, I think I'd be much happier. But it also says, I think it's supposed to be a standing metal seam roof. J, I think that's the one. So I'm confused. It's metal. It's the J notation that we should.
Correct.
Okay.
The metal standing seam roof is on the tall mass as well as the lower mass.
So the wood siding is on the face of the building that faces the parking lot and goes all the way down the Middlefield Road side. And I'm not sure if does it go on the back of the building as well?
Correct.
So the walls of the museum are effectively the vertical wood siding.
Correct. All of the lower mass walls are wood siding. The taller mass has the metal standing seam.
When you get to the other end, the open classroom, I see in in the picture you have up on the screen, there is actually a form there, but on page A5.0, there's nothing there. It's just a wall. And so which one is it? Is it this picture that you have up here?
So as I mentioned, this building that's represented here is a future phase building. So the first phase will be the vision you're seeing. In
so we can review that when it actually is built. It's not anticipated as part of this project.
Well, it's not currently funded. We're hoping it might be funded within the construction phase of this project, but at this point in time, it's
But we're not approving that today. Since there's no building there to approve.
I don't believe
okay.
That's correct.
So let's go to the wall that's shown on page A5.0. It's identified by letter C. That's the one that's most the closest to the Girl Scout house. That's a vertical standing seam metal wall. Is that right? But we don't have a sample of what that looks like, what the seam spacing is, and there's just a piece of metal on our. So I think I'd like to see that. I'd like to know what that's going to actually look like before we approve that, since that has a significant impact when you're approaching the museum from the Girl Scout house. So the relationship is important. In general, I think your concept of activities and layout of this building and the parking lot is superb, really well done. So again, I guess my only concern is the metal roof, and I'm not sure that's a deal breaker, but it is a concern.
Board Member McKinnon.
I would have to agree with comments of my colleagues here. I think the metal roof does not provide a good contextual, I would say marriage, but a contextual compatibility with the Girl Scout building or the Lucy Stern building. I think it does provide more of like a garage type look on it, and I think it would be much better with some other material, probably a natural material that would provide better contextuality with the adjacent structures.
Board Member Wimmer.
I think this is so exciting. I can't believe that you're going to incorporate all of that into one place, and I think you're going to have more parking or something, because I think it's going to be so crazy popular, or sell advance tickets or something, I don't know. But I guess, yeah, the last time that we reviewed this project, we wanted to see some kind of a link between Lucy Stern and this building. And I see that you've done that with the gable configuration of the buildings, which I think is positive. I think also we have to take a look at the exposure on Middlefield Road, which is right now on Middlefield, just the end of the building is facing Middlefield, but now we're extending the building along Middlefield. So you can look on sheet A 4.3 to see that expanse of elevation on Middlefield. So I think the exciting part of the building is sort of off of the, the front entrance that's off of the road, where you see the courtyards and things like that. I'm just wondering if this elevation on Middlefield gives you enough of a sense of how exciting that space is, how exciting that is. I mean, I like the little gable and the tunnel entry. I mean, that kind of gives it a human scale where this is the place to go in. I mean, I think that's kind of an exciting feature. I'm just wondering if there's enough going on that Middlefield elevation. And I guess I see your point about changing the roof color to red at that point. I guess that's kind of a neat idea. I guess one of our concerns is, how does it last? How are these timeless choices that are going to last, and are they going to age well when the building ages?
I also will share the comments of my board members regarding the metal roofing. And here are some of my comments, and looking for your name again. It's Sarah, right? Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I also I'm definitely pleased to see the gable structures. I'm in particular in concert with Board Member Wimmer's comment about the Middlefield Road elevation. That's probably going to be the biggest public presentation of this before anyone enters the property. The idea of that, the bridge and tunnel, fantastic idea to get that good focal point or visual attraction on Middlefield Road. With the Secretary of Interior standards, as you're familiar with, is the idea of compatibility and differentiation. That entry tunnel could be really a great place for differentiation and even more contemporary expression of a kind of a detail. And have that, then the background of that then be the long Middlefield Road elevation. And when I see that much metal roofing, which is a pretty long piece of the material of the building, thinking about that, I see, and as you've seen too, if you go around Palo Alto, you see a lot of older structures having the metal standing seam, including new buildings having the metal seam, and the residential projects a lot. And talking to some of the other designers who've incorporated those materials on their buildings, I asked them, why did you use that material? And a common comment I hear is that it's the latest fashion. And when I look at design products or designs in themselves, it's certainly easy to make something that looks good today. Current fashion will look good today. The question I always ask on every project is, will it look good tomorrow? And so will this fashion, if the metal roof is a fashion, because we can have different materials that last for a long time, tile roof or other materials can also last a long time. Will this become dated when metal roofings become out of fashion? And therefore, we said, now how does that relate to the historical resources on the property? So I do share the same comment about if there's some other material that we know will stand the test of time and relate to the historical structures on the project. I think that'll add more compatibility for this project to the other structures on the property. The entry tower, the entry tunnel, again, how far can you take it to be contemporary to get that real excitement going? And then so there would be an example of the differentiation. But to get the roofing to be the compatibility would be my thoughts about that. Okay, Board Member, Vice Chair Bauer.
So I have a question for staff about the landscaping in front of the Girl Scout building. I have a recollection that in the 70s that parking lot was reconfigured. I wonder if that landscaping is actually would be considered like historic fabric because it has changed, at least in.
I think it's for Roger.
God, all the years I've been here, it's the first time that's happened.
I didn't think they actually rang.
So I guess that was rude.
Not at all.
Plantings from the 1970s is what you're saying. Does that become historic? I guess cultural landscape is what we're talking about here. Some of those older, and Peter Jensen, our city landscape architect, is here, and he, has a sense for how old some of those plants are. I believe there might be some flowering shade shrubs, for instance, that might be older, even older than the 1970s. But there have definitely been some changes out there. There are definitely some protected trees out there, and some of those are to be retained. Peter, did you want to provide any answers to help David?
Peter Jensen, landscape architect for the city of Palo Alto. Good morning. The landscape that's in the front now has definitely gone through some renovations over its time. Currently, it exists as a kind of a crisscrossing of asphalt pathways and some kind of unstructured planting areas. There are a few plants that are there, mostly right up against the building facade, that are probably 35 to 40 years old. Most plant material doesn't live to be much older than that. There has been a part that is closer to the parking lot itself that's kind of been taken to make a little native garden there, which we are actually going to relocate in the park at some point. And there is one heritage oak tree that, again, is growing very closely to the actual Girl Scout house that will be retained there. I think the idea is to create a landscape buffer as there is there now. Of course, we will be using more native and drought-tolerant planting material there along the front to access and kind of buffer the parking lot from the front of the building is the idea, but to also kind of highlight the front entry, which it doesn't do now. Basically, there's no direct real connection to the parking lot and the entry of the Girl Scout house, so we want to make that alignment better. In this, I guess, updated plan and the reconfiguration of the parking lot does get closer to the facade of the Girl Scout house, but there is still a good substantial buffer there to provide some type of frontage to the space between the parking lot.
Well, so I'm asking because that's one of the things that Emily had asked us to consider in the analysis of the project on page 60. Well, it's 110 of our packet, and I'm not seeing the historic significance of that existing space as being significant. I mean, it's been haphazard in my experience, and I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't strike me as being like an iconic space we want to preserve.
Right.
And I actually think the new parking arrangement will improve the look, and even though it gets closer, I think this is an infringement on some historic landscaping that probably is
No,
better.
I think that I would agree with your statement there that that is it was kind of a remnant of land that was left there between the parking lot and the Girl Scout house. It had really no structure or design to it. And I think we recognize that there is a buffer there. We wanted to maintain that and not push the parking lot right to the building, so there was none there. So we did maintain the buffer in that location, and I do think, as you're saying, it does set up better now with the parking lot and the relationship to the other buildings and the connection to kind of the complex that's there now currently.
This new design, I have to add, is an enormous improvement in the way in which the parking area relates to the Lucy Stern building, because it's pulled it way back away from that.
Right.
So that has the same, now from the parking, this parking lot has the same kind of grandeur and space that you have around on Melville, Middlefield Road. So, you know, there's a compromise in everything. I just want, since we're going to have to address this, I just wanted to be clear that there's nothing, the oak tree, of course, is going to be saved, and that's significant.
Right.
But the shrubbery next to the building probably could stay. I think the encroachment of the parking area into that currently sort of landscaped area probably doesn't rise to the level of significance. So,
right.
Just wanted that to be on the record for the council.
Thank you.
Board Member McKinnon.
Well, I'm just looking at the parking area in front of the Girl Scout building, and I'm just thinking that if that was like something other than like asphalt or concrete, maybe like pea stone or something, it would be less intrusive onto the facade of the Girl Scout building.
You're looking on page A1.1?
A1.1.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then are you talking about the paving material itself? Or?
Yeah, paving material itself. You know, the more less hard material, maybe like light gravel or something that would blend better with the landscaping in front of the Girl Scout building. Well, I don't know exactly what it would be. Something other than concrete or asphalt, though. Maybe a more natural type of material.
Yeah. Mr. Jensen, yes.
I think that we can explore the material that's there. From, I think, transportation's look at it that because we have made the connection basically from Kellogg across Middlefield and made that whole kind of bike connection that then relates to the park and brings people into the park, that when you got to the point where you were basically between the Girl Scout house and the Junior Museum and Zoo, that you have the opportunity then to, you know, if you're riding a bike, basically ride in front of the Girl Scout house and then get over to Hopkins. I think they would prefer to have paving there as far as the concrete goes, but I think we can look at other materials. I mean, I think if we were going to make it a little bit more rustic, that you would use a decomposed granite basically out there along the front to aesthetically give it the feel of the Girl Scout house, which we can have more conversations about with the transportation staff to see if that's possible to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that's a little lighter touch than
Yeah, and I think that we also tried to make the walkways in there they don't have to be specifically linear too. They can have some type of more free form or curvature to them, so it is a little bit softer for the facade there.
I've seen in other developments the use of permeable asphaltic paving. I don't know if it's permeable asphalt or permeable concrete, but I've seen it on some of the Stanford property, and it looks kind of like pebbles, but it's fixed, and that's one way to get softer. Do you happen to know, or Sarah, do you happen to know, for the new parking surface, would that be permeable material such as permeable concrete or permeable asphaltic concrete? Do you know?
Both. Let me go back to the site plan.
A1.1 we're looking at, yeah.
Okay, so the parking stalls in the center of the parking lot, those will all have permeable paving underneath it for stormwater treatment and management. So the parking will slope to those and the water will percolate through. The rest of the drive aisles will be impermeable paving.
Right, good, okay, good. Certainly any surface materials will need to conform with the American with Disabilities Act too. So gravel may not, anyway, so that'd be something that would be addressed. Okay, Board Member Bunnenberg.
Light on. Isn't there a little fountain or the formation of a fountain there in the front of the Girl Scout house?
There is it's actually a bird bath that's there. It's dedicated to an actual a scout leader, a Boy Scout leader, not actually a Girl Scout leader. We don't know exactly how it ended up in front of the Girl Scout house and not in the Boy Scout area. We have been in conversation with or we've reached out to the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and have made them aware that we would like to propose relocating that closer to the actual Boy Scout area in the Lucy Stern complex and rededicating the fountain or the bird bath and giving it, I think, a more proper and more respectful location with either within their courtyard or somewhere in that location. So that has not been determined yet. We're still in conversations about that, but yes, it is still there, and that will be still maintained on site. And like I said, our proposal is to relocate it closer to the Boy Scout area.
And can you about that large pecan tree that's at the edge of the asphalt area near the Junior Museum?
So it's planned on being maintained in that location. We're going to work our hardest and protect the tree as much as possible. I will divulge that the review of the pecan, because it is very old for the type of tree that it is in a high-use area and is very large, that there is some concern about the tree. I think we would like to again, work as hard as we can to maintain the tree through construction and make it safe as possible. That is our intention to stay there. But it's definitely going to take definitely a little bit of work to
quite a bit of work.
Yeah, to keep it in a state while construction is going on. The architects have done a great job of moving back the structures and maintaining a good buffer around it. Right now, if you kind of know, it's really growing right up against the parking lot, and the majority of its actual root zone is covered by asphalt, which we're going to now expose and create a better kind of a planting environment for it, which definitely should benefit the tree.
Before we move on, I would like to invite any members of the public to speak to us on this agenda item. If there are members of the public like to come speak to us, you can make yourself known. Seeing none, bringing it back to the board and public members. Okay. I'd like to ask the board if there's any other comment on expanding our comment about the metal roofing that we saw from the Middlefield Avenue. If you look on page A5.0, there are metal standing roof seams showing throughout the complex. And if any board members have comment about expanding their concern about metal on the other portions of the proposed building, or is it just the Middlefield Road Avenue?
I wanted to speak about that. So I think this is a really challenging, I guess, element of the building. And I think could be troubling for the applicant to have to switch gears. I know that the Lucy Stern Center has the Spanish tile roof, but the existing junior museum has a composition shingle roof, I believe. It looks like that's what it looks like in the photos, as well as the Girl Scout house has a
wooden shakes.
Wooden shakes, okay. So historically, it has a wood shake roof. Would it be more appropriate for the new building to have a wood shake roof? I mean, so I guess we're just saying we don't like the standing metal seam roof. Does that mean that they should have a Spanish tile roof?
So I think if the HRB then can give the applicant some direction as clear as possible, that would be.
So that was why I was kind of thinking this, like what as a board, what would we prefer to see? So I'm not sure if the Spanish tile roof is a good solution, because Lucy Stern, it's sort of its iconic thing. It should stand alone. So should it have the wood shake roof, because that's what's existing?
I need your lights.
Has composition shingles.
Yeah, I think no, not composition. Doesn't the Girl Scout house have cedar shingles?
I'm just looking at it in the photos.
I mean, it looks like that from, although maybe you can't really see. What do you think? I think it's a wood roof. I don't see the Junior Museum as a tile roof building, frankly. Doesn't strike me as being compatible.
That's more the Spanish colonial revival style. This is clearly not that style.
Yeah, and I think Martin's absolutely right. We need to give some direction, since we seem to express unanimously that the metal roof is not something that we're.
Well, I was just trying to think of the merits of the metal roof. So I do see that there's this red color. Maybe that's trying to emulate the Spanish tile. So maybe that's one of the applicants.
But I think that red color is only on the tunnel entrance, and the rest of it is a light gray, which.
I mean, what if they did more of the red? Because red pulls in the idea of the Spanish tile. Would that make it relate?
Yeah. Board member McKinnon.
Yes. Are the wood shakes still a permissible material for roofs now, or from the fire codes and all that?
You have to. My understanding is you have to get a fire-treated wood shake, which cuts the lifespan of a shake in half. So instead of being a 30-year roof, it becomes like a 15-year roof, which is why you don't see them used on any new homes. You can get a higher fire rating out of a comp shingle. I don't see comp shingles on this either.
Is there like a synthetic wood shake shingle that? has the appearance of
No,
it? Or?
Cal Shake was a synthetic shake. They went out of business 4 times before they finally died, and they had a terrible product.
I just think the metal roof makes it look like a warehouse or a garage. You know, it just doesn't. It's not appropriate for this type of structure.
Did you find a picture of what's on the Girl Scout house?
Yeah, it does appear to be an asphalt shingle roof.
Oh.
It's of a light brown color, so it looks almost wood-like.
0.8. Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at here. Well,
I mean, I think if it ended up being an asphalt shingle, I mean, I guess that relates to the neighboring residential roofs, but this is a commercial building, so. Well, it's not residential. It is commercial. It is commercial. It's a public building. So I think if we ask them to do a wood shake roof, that doesn't seem appropriate either. So our other option is asphalt shingles, which is, I think we should take a second look at accepting the metal roof. I think it's like, look, there's a metal roof out there. I look through the window and I look at that metal roof. You know, like, that's not so bad. I don't know. I'm just trying to, I think a metal roof has longevity to it. I think somehow maybe we can get it to look a little bit more compatible.
Sarah, if I could ask you a question. How did you come by the gray color for the roof? What was the thinking in terms of your design?
That's a good question. We studied a range of colors. We did look at going darker. We actually did look at going red with a majority of the metal, which I think is really compelling, especially as it relates to the clay tile roofs of the Lucy Stern. We just didn't want to overwhelm you with too strong of a gesture, so we settled on a more neutral color. But we're definitely willing to we could do color studies of the metal colors if that would be beneficial to look at. More of the red material. We could look at a darker metal color, which is it could recede a little bit more and not pop as much as a lighter color. And then the color in the renderings is probably a little lighter than what we're showing on the materials board. It's a little bit more neutral taupe range.
So is the cedar siding, that vertical cedar siding, going to be stained?
Yeah, with a clear stain is our
clear.
curve.
So eventually that'll silver out. So then we'd have a silver wall with a silver roof.
Yes, so we can definitely do color studies if that's a request.
I certainly sympathize, Margaret, with your concern, and I have the same concern. This project should move forward.
What if we did a white stucco wall?
No, I actually like
because
the wood wall.
that relates to Lucy Stern, and then we have the metal.
But that's a really big design change. So I mean, I don't feel that I want to go there, but maybe you're right. We do a different color in the roof, something that will, red color metal roof, even though I don't like the metal, would at least relate to all of Lucy Stern's roof materials. So I don't know, I'm a little uncomfortable at this point because I don't want to be the architect, even though it's what we are.
Yes, Beth.
I have the question whether when you're speaking of a red roof, you're not talking about a fire engine red roof. Are you talking about more of a terracotta?
Yeah, the color, it's on the color board, which I think is a terracotta look. It would emulate, I think, the color of Lucy Stern.
Because I, too, have questions about the metal roof. I just feel like it's completely out of character with the rest of the building. Are there any asphalt shingles that are of a thicker quality that would give you some of the feeling of a shake roof, but the protection of a fire?
Not that much. No, the asphalt shingles, are only maybe at max quarter of an inch. They lap, but
Well, there are thicker ones though.
yeah, but they don't get to the 3/4 to 1 inch thickness of a wood shake.
But what Martin's indicating is better, yes.
Really?
There's
Half inch?
They have yeah.
You know,
Wow.
conventional shingle, I mean.
Anyway,
Which has little depth.
Up at Tahoe, a lot of people have metal shingles that work out pretty well with all that snow. Been up there for years, so that's a possible option.
that's a good point. You know. So on our screens here, you've got the sample color board, and if you compare the far top right corner color, metal color, with the Lucy Stern tile roof color, it's pretty close. I mean, it's not the same, but this is the metal is a brand new piece of metal, and it'll get dirty and darken.
Mm-hmm. Trees will fall on it, or trees litter.
I don't know.
I mean, if you can just look at that middle field elevation and just try to use your imagination and imagine having just an everyday asphalt shingle roof on it, is that going to improve it at all? I don't know. I just think that's just that's so typical and sort of uninteresting. And this is an exciting building with a lot of textures and colors. I mean, maybe, I guess at this point the metal roof isn't really bothering me that much. I think it's more appropriate to the building. Maybe we're struggling with the fact that the building is placed where it is, and we're trying to make it compatible with its surroundings. But I think in terms of the use of the building, it's probably a wise choice. But
it may be that the color is part of the problem. It's so light and doesn't have the substance that the surrounding roof lines have. It's a very bright kind of result.
So just another thought, Sarah, is looking at the Middlefield Road elevation. It seems like the two contemporary features would be the skylight monitor and then the bridge and entry tunnel.
Correct.
So just one thought I have is if somehow those two contemporary features can become a little more outstanding in a way, so that the comments you're hearing about regarding the metal roof become a little more subordinate to that facade. So when I look at that drawing on A4.3, the way the rendering is that it looks like the metal facade is probably the dominant feature of that elevation. So somehow that monitor and the entry tunnel, to get that to be more dominant compared to and let the roof become more subordinate somehow from a design point of view, maybe that then can address in that way just the metal is just a fact of material. Mm-hmm. And that you had an initial, on your presentation, you had an earlier concept drawing showing that entry tunnel would be a transparent material. Can you go back to that? Is one of your very early slides. And that'll be consistent with my thought of what I'm talking about. Right there you go, right there. See that entry tunnel concept? You had that light material there. I was extremely intrigued by that because that really set a very contemporary tone. Diagrammatically, it's the entry point to there, and it gives you that promenade, as you mentioned there. When I looked at that, I said, well, to me, that's the answer, to let that contemporary feature be the dominant feature, and then let roofing, no matter what it is, be subordinate. That would address my concern about that. And I know that any kind of detailing that comes out of your office is going to be really superb detailing, and to really accentuate that feature, I think, to me, that's the answer for Middlefield Road. Yeah, and then whatever color the standing roof becomes, well, then it becomes appropriate so that it becomes not dominant, but it's subordinate. So coloration could become the answer to any subordination. So that'd be my suggestion for that. Again, that concept really there's the answer. Then I saw a little gable. So it kind of lost some of the momentum, I think, of your contemporary design. Is it early enough in the process that your office can look at that particular aspect?
It's definitely something we can study. The reason we went away from this more translucent material is that in order to create successful rainbows, you have to have a darker enclosure with specific lights.
Yeah.
But I understand the comment is to play up that break in the building and really accentuate it as a contemporary entry portal into the rest of the project.
Yeah, it really connects the rest of that site there too, from the Middlefield point of view. I think to me that's really exciting idea.
Yeah, we can definitely explore that part of that elevation in the promenade to play it up more. And I agree. I think we can study the colors of the roof. I think taking it potentially a little darker might downplay it and allow the rest of the features to pop.
You heard the initial comments of the HRB talking about the roof, which says dominant, dominant, dominant. Well, get it subordinate, and you can do that by distraction of this beautiful entry portal. I think that's a superior idea. I think.
I'm not sure I fully understand, because that entry feature right now comes out and provides some protection while you're getting into the building, and the previous plan doesn't. I don't think. Is that just open? I mean, there's no. What's in the shown, the glass area that's shown here, does that have a recess where there's a covered area inside before you open the door to get in, or is that it? Is the door right at the front of the building?
Yeah. This is just a concept sketch.
And this is all exterior. There's no door within that tunnel.
Oh, okay,
it's just an exterior passageway
then,
through the building.
That could work. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the roof. I guess as I'm looking more and more at the roof elevation, the elevations that show the roof, the spacing of the standing seams seems to be random. And it turns out that's one of the things that bothers me. I assume that's intentional, that some places are going to have narrow panels and others would have wide ones? I mean, or is that just a
I'm glad you brought that up. It's something we didn't get into, and it's something we need to further study. But one idea with the standing metal seam is playing with a different rhythm of the ribbing, so that we get some patterning and potentially some rhythms that the JMC can use as an educational tool.
Yeah, that just takes me right back to the sort of Quonset hut look. The randomness bothers me more, I think, even though it's a very long space, and sort of I understand what your thinking is, except that
most people will probably think it's a mistake.
Yeah. And there's nothing that comes out of your company, your design company, that's a mistake.
Oh, thank you.
So I don't know how to move forward on this.
Member Wimmer? Yeah.
I just think conceptually with that tunnel idea that you enter with the gable, with the red gable or whatever it is, I think that gable should continue through the building, because that's a tunnel through the building. I don't know why you don't repeat that same gable on the courtyard side. I think.
Actually, it does, and it's one of our playful characters. Let's see.
Seems like that same red. I mean, I know it's red.
If you could go to page.
It's just not reflecting, and I mean, I'm thinking that.
If you go to elevation 3 on A4.2, it's actually a partial section cut through the tunnel. So the concept is that the tunnel does, and that red material does go all the way through that wing of the building. And on the courtyard side, the portal actually gets smaller, so it's of a more childlike scale. So the portal facets itself from a bigger entrance on Middlefield down to a smaller portal that lets out on the courtyard side. So it's kind of a playful, childlike experience as you go through this narrowing rainbow tunnel. And that red material does penetrate all the way through and then expose itself on the courtyard side as well.
But on the interior or also on the exterior?
It would just be an interior experience of that material.
I see. And then are there any photovoltaic roof shingles? Isn't that something? Have you considered any solar collection systems that might be an interesting roof element?
that might...
Photovoltaics were considered earlier on in the project. We're up against very tight budget constraints at this point, so we're proposing to meet the code minimum of a PV-ready roof, so it's structurally designed to accept a PV system in the future, but we don't currently have the funding to include that at this point.
Maybe you could get that local company that makes those donate some. Just a thought.
So, Chair Bernstein, if I can make a suggestion, since we're somewhat at an impasse and we have to move forward, I would recommend we create a subcommittee to look at the roof colors and let 3 board members actually move the rest. Just meet with Sarah and her colleagues and figure this out. Because I think we basically like the design and the plan, and I don't see a way to get around this right now.
Then, Sarah, do you know if you and your team would be looking at that that entry tunnel to get that to be more dominant in form, or this is our brainstorming? That's all.
We can definitely study it. We're going before the ARB next month, so we'd probably wait to get their comments and then take both committees' comments and respond accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. How's the board feel about Vice Chair Bauer's comment? Or do you want to wait until ARB finishes their review? When are you meeting with ARB?
July 20th.
Okay.
Is it going to come back to us after they look at it?
Well, that was not the plan, but if your concept of a subcommittee, I mean, ideally, I would think that we would have, we have what we have for the ARB, but we could also have, an optional roof color that the ARB could look at. If it could be looked at before then, I think would be best. Mm-hmm. And then we don't have to continue.
I don't want this to be an endless loop. We need to. I'd really like to visit this museum after it's completed. So if we did a subcommittee and worked with Sarah and her colleagues before the ARB meeting, which is a month away, and that would be, so let the subcommittee make the recommendation and move it forward. What I really don't want to have happen is that after we've spent a lot of time on this, the ARB say, oh, we don't like that, we're doing this, and that's the end of it.
I think having, the preference of the HRB as far as color to be compatible to help the ARB to make that finding to be on compatibility would be the best thing. So I think that's my recommendation to the applicant, is that we work on this alternate color that could be looked at by this subcommittee in the interim, would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Of course, the history of the fire station situation, which totally got blasted.
So if we could entertain who would like to be on that subcommittee for color of the metal roofing. I'm color challenged, so I'm not going to vote on that. Okay, so we got board members Wimmer and Bunnenberg. Okay. That is enough.
Color challenge too.
Okay.
You don't want to be on it? I can be on. You should be.
Okay, so be board members Kohler, Bunnenberg, and Wimmer will be on the subcommittee, and then to coordinate with Sarah and her team, the staff. How would we communicate? How should we communicate?
I can, as the project coordinator, planner, I can pull together, work with the applicant to identify, whether that, let's say that company, comes forward with something, and then give you a call.
Okay, thank you.
Martin?
Other board member Bunnenberg, yes.
Yes. In spite of our real focus and worry about this part, overall, this is a great design. This looks like it's a magic place for children. So congratulations. That I think is something that, at least from my perspective, I hope you'll take away.
Okay. But I do want to...
I'll second that.
Okay, and what I'd like to do is read what we've been asked to do today. review and provide comments on the attached Rinconada Park Historic Resource Evaluation, specifically the portions related to the project scope. And then also the HRE addresses the significance of the Girl Scout House, also known as Lou Henry Hoover House, in the site context. Provide preliminary comments regarding the site improvements, which we, with respect to Secretary of Interior standards, I made reference to compatibility and differentiation. And then provide input regarding the compliance with the architectural review findings, particularly finding B2. This last, yeah. So is that packet page page 162? Let me turn to that.
Great. Crafting a motion that includes all that, it's going to take us another hour. But I'm willing to step forward. So I would like to move that this project meets the Secretary of Interior standards for complies with the Secretary of Interior standards and specifically does not cause a significant impact to the resources of the Girl Scout building. What's the next one?
The packet page 162, is it?
Oh yeah, 162. I think that it does also it does preserve, respect, and integrate existing natural features that contribute positively to the site and historic character of the historic resources areas. Mm-hmm. With the one provision in this motion that the subcommittee work with Cody Wozniak, Anderson Wozniak Architects to find some solution to the roofing problem that the board has raised today. And that should the subcommittee recommendation be changed by the ARB, that comes back to this board. So if the ARB has a different idea of what our subcommittee wants, then this board needs to look at that idea, because I don't want another fire station experience with them. Did I cover everything from staff standards?
That's workable.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, looking for a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. Any discussion before we vote on the motion? Okay, all in favor, signal aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously with the 6 board members present. There's also the question, about something about doing a qualification for getting the Lou Hoover House listed, I believe. Was that a question?
Yes, it's an outstanding, to-do item that would be, related to this. It's not required for this project, of course, but down the road would be great, in a partnership situation. We haven't, been in conversation with the Girl Scout of Northern California yet about the HRE, so and the possibility of nomination. So that would be something that has to take place first, probably, before we come forward with that.
Okay. So staff advise any action HRB to move that forward, or it would take an HRB comment to move that forward? Or?
I think just general, support statement would be helpful.
Okay. Just had a question from Vice Chair. Should that be an agendized discussion rather than just a recommendation right now?
I think it doesn't have to be a formal anything, just a general statement of support, straw poll if you want. We would eventually agendize, after work with the Girl Scouts organization to put any kind of nomination on your board as a specific item.
Okay. I can make the statement of general support then to move forward with to get the Girl Scout building listed, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay.
Make a motion.
Okay.
You going to make a motion?
Yeah. So I move that we advise the process to move forward.
Second.
Second.
Okay. All's in favor? Aye. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Thanks. Anything else of our list of recommended actions on this project? Okay. Sarah, thank you so much for the presentation. Again, you've heard good support for the project overall, and I think it's going to be a really, really exciting thing to see that materialize. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next on our agenda is approval of minutes from two different dates, May 25th, 2017 and June 8th. Any motions to approve or amend?
Chair Bernstein, I have some comments. I typically don't make changes in the minutes because these are verbatim. It looks like some robots, transcribing this. But I found a couple of places on the minutes where I think corrections would make it clearer for somebody reading this later. Where'd it go?
Oh, there.
There. So on the minutes of May 25th, on page 7, under board member Corey, I have two questions. One is, it wasn't clear to me, but this new garage, and it says early for the public safety building, I think he said entirely for the public safety building, and that makes a difference in his question. On page 10, very bottom line, board member Mencken says, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does look like there are solar arrays adjacent. And I think what Michael was referring to is that the solar arrays are on top of the garage. I don't think adjacent was what he was after. Page 13, in the middle paragraph where I'm speaking, there is a line, if you can find California Avenue area, is going to see the same kind of pressure of, and it says explanation, and I think I said expansion. And by the way, I started reading these pretty casually, and the more I got into them, the more carefully I was reading. On page 22, in that paragraph where I'm speaking, there's a line that says, I wonder whether every building that is significant has to be excellent. And there is the word has significant, has to be excellent. So either I was saying has significance, has to be excellent, or every building that is significant. I'm not sure how to correct that. I think it should have been has significance. I don't know. I'm again not meaning to be picky about this, but having recently gone through a lot of minutes from 6 years ago, it makes a difference when you're trying to understand. By the way, on the last page, 36, where we are now in the motion that I made to approve the addition to the Eichler project. I think I said I moved to approve the project as submitted with the expanded overhangs as we discussed, and with the inaudible, I think was lintel. Didn't we add a lintel over one door?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's also significant. So that's it. My apologies to the transcriber.
Okay, with those corrections, any other corrections before we vote to approve as amended? Okay, I'll
move to approve these minutes.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. Next, the minutes of June 8th. Any motion to amend or approve?
I have no amendments. I'll move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I'm looking to see, that was about the Mills Act, okay. All right, all in favor, signal aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously, thank you. That concludes our agenda today. Any other, any comments from board members or staff?
Oh, I have a comment. The Palo Alto Stanford Heritage Board met last night and has decided to start publicizing HRB meetings at least on their Facebook page so that we can get cross-traffic and let people in the preservation community know that the HRB has meetings and that there might be something of interest there. I think that helps both the HRB and PAST in their missions to do this. So just wanted to make that board members aware of that.
Okay. Any other subcommittee items or board member questions, comments, announcements? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.